I work the graveyard shift at a local shipping warehouse. Most of what I do involves counting inventory, making sure all shipments and items are accounted for and properly tracked throughout the whole organizing process. Occasionally, I'll have a coworker on the same shift, but more often than not, it's just me. That night was no different than usual. I arrived at the warehouse and checked in with my manager, who locked up the place and left me to handle everything. I started with my regular routine, going over all the shipments that had come in earlier that day. About an hour into my shift, I walked past a door I noticed was slightly ajar. Closed, but not latched all the way, sticking out just a little. This particular door was at the back of the building, the one truckers typically use to come in. I opened it and peeked outside, seeing nothing but a quiet, empty lot behind the warehouse. Not much to look at. I assumed my manager had simply forgotten to lock it. I didn't have a key to any of those access doors myself, so I couldn't do anything about it anyway. Honestly, it didn't seem like a big deal, at least not to me. I shut the door and got back to checking inventory. I was moving quickly, getting through a fair bit, and reached the next aisle of shelves when I thought I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I immediately looked up, but there was nothing. What I thought I saw, again, just in my peripheral vision, was someone dashing across the opening at the end of the hallway. I figured it must have been my mind playing tricks on me, but it still made my heart race for a second. I rubbed my eyes and shook my head, wondering what was going on with me. I debated checking it out, but decided against it at first, mainly because it would slow me down, and also because I was nearly certain it was nothing. Things like this happen all the time. You think you see something, and it turns out to be nothing. So why would this time be any different? Still, as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that someone might have actually been there. I sighed, a little annoyed with myself for feeling so paranoid, and made my way to the far end of the hallway. This part of the warehouse I hardly ever visit since it doesn't relate to my usual tasks. It's mostly full of shelves stacked with large pallets ready for shipment. Since I don't normally go in there, most of the lights were off. I stood in the hallway, staring into the dimly lit room for a few moments, hoping to catch any movement. But everything stayed still. I turned and returned to my station to continue my work. Maybe it was that moment, or maybe just coincidence, but I suddenly felt hit with a wave of exhaustion. Out of nowhere, I was tired and sluggish, far more than I had been before. I didn't want to slow down though, so I pushed to finish that aisle before taking a break. But not even 5 minutes later, I caught something again in the corner of my eye. I quickly turned and looked toward the hallway. I swear it looked like a person, or a figure, peeking from behind the corner as if they were observing me. But again, there was nothing. This time, I immediately stopped what I was doing and walked quickly to the end of the hallway. Even though it was dark and I didn't see anything, I still called out, not really expecting anyone to answer, but just in case. "Hello?" I paused for a few seconds, then walked further into the room. It was eerily quiet. Each step I took echoed throughout the massive space. I made it about halfway in and glanced around. While standing there, I felt a deep, unsettling sensation, as if I was being watched. The inability to see anyone only made it worse. I quickly turned back and walked briskly to the other end of the hallway, glancing back one last time. The darkness of that room gave me serious chills. I was heading back to my task when a sudden, deafening metallic thud echoed through the warehouse. It sounded like metal striking one of the large shelving units. There was a moment of silence. Only the faint echo remained, before I heard another noise. This time, it was softer, like a light tapping on the metal, almost rhythmic. It felt like whoever, or whatever, was in there was trying to get my attention, to lure me back into that dark space. Now realizing this couldn't just be in my head, I took off running. I headed straight to the back door and out into the lot. Once I was far enough away, I called for help. I didn't expect the police to do much, at least not right away, but surprisingly, when they searched the warehouse, they discovered someone hiding behind one of the large shelving units in the dark section. It was a man, probably in his 40s, looking completely unkempt and disturbing. What made it all worse was when they checked the security footage. They saw him wandering around the outside of the warehouse over the past several nights, trying every door, seeing if one was unlocked. All those times, I was alone inside, sometimes just feet away from where he was. From the brief glimpse I got of him being led to the squad car, the guy seemed completely unhinged. I don't think they ever figured out exactly what his plan was, but just thinking about how he tried to lure me into that room still makes my skin crawl. When I was in college, I worked part-time overnight shifts at my parents' 24/7 laundromat. It was a small place on the outskirts of town. Something about the building always struck me as eerie. Maybe it was the age, or the constant low hum of the machines that made the atmosphere a little creepy. Still, I preferred working for my parents over any other job. This was on a Friday, the only day I worked the full overnight shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I swapped places with my dad, who left me a few snacks in the back and gave the usual reminder to call him if I needed anything. There were still a few customers coming in for the first hour, so I stayed behind the counter and made sure everything ran smoothly. By midnight, the place had emptied out and all the machines were idle. I stayed behind the counter for another 15 minutes, scrolling through my phone before starting the cleaning routine. Then a man walked in. I looked up and was instantly puzzled. He wasn't carrying anything. No laundry or bag. He wore a thick hoodie with the hood up and both hands tucked into his pockets. I greeted him, but he didn't respond or even glance my way. He slowly wandered through the aisles of washers and dryers, seemingly browsing, and then just walked back out the entrance. I watched him as he crossed the parking lot. He didn't get into a car. He just strolled across the street and disappeared from view. It's not exactly common for someone to enter a laundromat in the middle of the night with no laundry, wander around, and then leave. He didn't do anything wrong, technically, but something about the whole encounter left me feeling uneasy. Being alone certainly didn't help. If there had been other customers around, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. With not much else to do, I began my cleaning duties. As I worked, the only thing I could come up with was maybe he thought he left something behind earlier and came back to check. But then again, why wouldn't he just ask me? It didn't add up. That thought lingered as I went around wiping counters and tidying up. Then, at some point, I happened to glance up and saw that same man standing right outside the entrance doors. At first, I didn't even realize it was a person because of how dark it was and the fact that he was dressed in all black. By the time I did recognize him, he was already walking away again. How long had he been standing there? I walked up to the glass doors and peered down the street, but he had vanished. I couldn't spot him anywhere. The whole thing was unnerving. His look, his behavior, the timing. It made me uncomfortable. I thought about calling my dad, but I didn't want to wake him up over something I couldn't even explain. He wouldn't have been upset, but I was still new at the job and didn't want to seem like I couldn't handle being there alone. I stayed alert for the next hour, pretty much glued to the front windows. But as time dragged on and no one else came in, I slowly relaxed and went back to my phone. That was until I heard faint creaking noises from the back of the building. I stood up and took a few cautious steps toward the back, trying to listen. I could hear light shuffling, someone quietly moving things around in one of the back rooms. I didn't need long to confirm someone was back there. Panic surged through me as I turned toward the front entrance and tried to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. I looked down and saw something looped around the exterior door handles. That man had tied something to keep it shut. That must have been what he was doing when I saw him watching me earlier. Pure fear took over. There was one other way out. A back exit door. I crept quietly toward the back room, still hearing soft movement, like someone searching through items, trying to stay silent. When I peeked into the room, I saw his back. He was digging through boxes on the floor. Then I spotted the back door. It was now or never. I bolted for it. He turned instantly and saw me. I reached the door, and for a split second, my heart dropped. There was some kind of rope tied to the handle, like he'd been trying to secure it shut. Luckily, whatever he'd done hadn't worked. I managed to force it open and ran. The man exited right after me, but didn't give chase. He just ran off. My dad and the police showed up soon after, but there weren't many leads. He was gone. Looking back, it was clear he was trying to trap me inside. I think he'd been planning to lock that back exit too, but hadn't gotten the chance. That delay gave me the time I needed to escape. His intentions were likely horrifying, and it still rattles me to this day how close I came to being stuck in there with him. Now, I never let my guard down when working alone. I don't assume anyone is harmless anymore because I know how quickly that illusion can shatter. For a few years, I worked at a private company as a data entry clerk. It was your typical entry-level job, definitely not highly regarded at the office. The managers constantly piled on extra responsibilities that didn't really fall under data entry. But I was young and it was my first real job, so I didn't argue. The office was located on the 5th and top floor of a fairly large office building in a small business complex just outside the city. Our company only occupied that top floor. The other levels were leased out to various businesses. From what I understood, all the other tenants were service-based companies that shut down for the day around 5 or 6 p.m. Ours was usually the only floor with people working into the evening. Since I was the data entry person, and basically the catch-all for random tasks, I often got stuck staying late to finish up whatever busy work needed doing. I was the lowest paid, so of course they were happy to have me put in the overtime. That particular night, my boss left me with a mountain of work. He didn't ask if I could stay late, just assumed I'd do it. And back then, I didn't push back. The extra pay was nice, and with the office empty, I actually preferred working at night. It was quieter, with no one breathing down my neck or micromanaging me. By 6 o'clock, everyone else was gone. I stayed and kept plugging away. After about 30 minutes, the main lights in the building shut off, leaving just the dim energy-saving lights on overhead. I was at my desk, moving steadily through the work, when about 3 hours into the shift, I heard something. It came from one of the floors below me. The sound was muffled and distant, typical for a big building, but it sort of sounded like a door opening or closing. I paused, looked up from the screen, and listened for a moment. But hearing nothing else, I shrugged it off and kept working. I didn't think much of it, probably just the building creaking or settling. Time passed. I'd say maybe another 30 or 45 minutes went by. I was nearly done, maybe just an hour left of tasks. It was getting late, and my eyelids were starting to feel heavy. I decided to grab a small cup of coffee from the Keurig machine near the front of the office. As I walked over, nothing seemed out of place. But it was on my way back that I finally noticed something strange. The door to the hallway at the back of the room was wide open. This was the door that led to a narrow hallway with just a utility closet and the stairwell to the lower floors. That door was always closed. Hardly anyone ever went back there. Curious, I wandered over to it and peeked out. I saw the closet door and the stairwell door, both shut, looking totally normal. Still, as I stood in that hallway, a weird chill ran through me. It left me with a sense of unease. I figured it was probably just the lighting. It was dim and eerie back there at night. I checked the stairwell door just to be safe, then went back into the office, closed the hallway door, and returned to my desk. I tried to stay focused, only one more hour of work, and then I could go home. But that door being open bugged me. Nobody should have come up there. And if they had, why not say anything? I forced myself to keep working, but every few minutes, I felt it. That sensation of being watched. I kept glancing around, lifting my eyes from the screen to check the room, but each time, I saw nothing. It was maddening. The unease was making me work slower, but the feeling was too strong to ignore. That went on for a good half hour, until suddenly, everything went dark. The dim overhead lights shut off completely, plunging the office into near total darkness. Only the glow of my computer screen remained, casting a pale circle of light around my desk. Everything else was black. I turned toward the other end of the office where the light switches were and stood up to walk over. But I stopped. In the dead silence of the office, I heard them. Soft, deliberate footsteps. Someone was walking slowly from that direction. Step by step, moving closer, getting nearer, just outside the range of the computer's light. I was frozen, listening, heart pounding in my chest. But when my adrenaline kicked in, I bolted. I ran straight to the back hallway, heading for the stairwell. Once I hit the stairwell, I was relieved to find it still lit. I didn't stop running until I was all the way down on the first floor and outside the building. From there, I called 911. It was freezing out, and I waited about 15 minutes before the first officer showed up. 2 more came shortly after, and together they entered the building. But by the time they searched it, they found no one. Even more frustrating, it took 2 days to access the security footage, and when they did, it was basically useless. The building had an old black and white system from the 90s, and the footage was blurry and pixelated beyond help. All they could determine was that some man had entered the building around 2 p.m., claiming he had an appointment with the company on one of the lower floors. Then he pretty much immediately slipped into the utility closet and stayed hidden. He waited until everyone else had left, except me. From there, it's unclear what he was planning. Maybe he was trying to scare me into leaving, or maybe it was something worse. Either way, I didn't wait around to find out. I quit shortly after, and I'm honestly so glad I did, for several reasons. But not having to be alone in that building again was a big one, especially knowing he was never caught.